Testing. Testing.
The work session of the Cape May City Planning Board is now in session. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. Should any member of this board have reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of that act, they shall so state at this time. Hearing none, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Karen, roll call.
Yes. Mr. Becerra.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Belasco.
Here.
Mr. Crowley. Here. Mr. Gorgone.
Here.
Mayor Mullick. Mrs. Reed. Deputy Mayor Sheehan.
Here.
Mr. Lundholm.
Here.
Mr. Malloy.
Here.
Mr. Paducas.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, the minutes of May 24th. Motion to adopt.
Second.
Crowley. Mr. Belasco seconds.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Crowley, seconded by Mr. Belasco. Mr. Belasco?
Yes.
Mr. Gorgone?
Abstain.
Deputy Mayor Sheehan?
Abstain.
Mr. Crowley? Yes. Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Malloy?
Abstain.
Mr. Paducas?
Yes.
Mr. Becerra?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the resolutions of the trustees of the First Presbyterian Church of Cape May, 500 Hughes Street, Block 1048, lots 1.01 and 6. Resolution look in order. Motion to adopt.
Make the motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Belasco, seconded by Mr. Lundholm. Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley? Yes. Deputy Mayor Sheehan?
Abstain.
Mr. Gorgone?
Abstain.
Mr. Belasco?
Yes.
Mr. Malloy?
Abstain.
Mr. Paducas?
Yes.
Mr. Becerra?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to kind of take this, we have two items for discussion, basically, and I think we'll take the zoning board annual decisions first. Not that the other one's going to be long, but basically, the zoning board is required by law, are they not? Yes. They're required to present an annual compilation of all the decisions they've made every year, and they haven't really been doing that every year, so what we have is a couple years' worth of decisions. And what you normally are looking for in this list is for maybe some sort of a pattern where they're routinely granting variances for a specific relief of one section of the ordinance. That might lead us to want to change the ordinances to maybe allow that to happen without having to gain relief. I don't know that I saw any pattern there, but that's usually what we're looking for. As far
Yeah,
as I
the
understand.
last one that I recall was
we had a lot of people knocking down houses on lots that had become undersized in the last, decade or two. And they were knocking down and rebuilding, they were rebuilding them and conforming in terms of the bulk, but they were still an undersized lot. So they kept coming in for variances, and, Larry Prey would come in like twice a month to knock something down and rebuild it, and it seemed a little ridiculous. So basically, we all passed an ordinance that said as long as you're knocking it down and putting up something that complies with the bulk requirements, the fact that it's an undersized lot doesn't mean you have to come back. So we had that was an example where we saw a pattern and then changed it. I don't recall the zoning board identifying any new patterns, that they were asking you to address. I think there was just a general.
And you would know.
I would know, I'm attorney for the zoning board, so recollection.
Anybody else have any comments on it?
I just had a comment, yeah. Not so much the pattern, I guess, but there were there were 40-some applications. All but 2 of them were approved.
I can talk about that. I can talk about that.
Okay.
Because I had someone call me, I actually forget who, it was someone in Cape May, governing body or something like that, called and asked me a similar question, and I'll give you the answer that I gave that nice person. There's a bunch of reasons why a large percentage of the applications are granted. But the fact that it's granted doesn't mean they got what they wanted. So there's a whole layer of filters that come before it actually gets to the point where you vote. The first layer is our history. So, I've been on the board now for 6 or 7 years. So the attorneys who regularly appear kind of know what's going to be a trigger and what's not for me or for the board and for Craig. So like floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is something that we're really careful on, because that is kind of like one of your key bulk things to keep things under control. So the attorneys who represent applicants tell people, look, don't go in there with a floor area ratio if you can avoid it. So, there may be 30 or 40 applications that would have come in that would have been denied had they not known that would be a very difficult one. Craig also acts as a great filter. I mean, he's been the attorney for the board for years and years. He's written large parts of the ordinance. He's done the master plan reviews. So when the architects and the engineers and the attorneys call with their first foray into it, he'll tell them, look, you're looking for a front yard setback, it's gonna ruin the streetscape. We're not gonna do it. HPC's not gonna like it, just take this back. And it disappears, and then it comes back with that complying. So that's a whole nother layer of filters. Then they come before the board, and they'll have something that the board doesn't like, or there'll be an objector, and then it gets massaged. And you've seen it here, but it happens even more in the zoning board. So then the thing that they get, Tom Keywood came in a couple months ago with something that we just hacked apart. The board just didn't like it, and they took off 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. So yeah, that application got approved, but it did not look anything like what they asked for, and we eliminated the floor area ratio variance and took out 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. So I'm just giving you a heads up that although by the time it gets to the point where there's a vote, last week they voted something down, by the way, a pool close to a house, they voted no. They just rejected it. So I understand that there's a high percentage of grants, but if you saw every project that was brought into the town for approval versus the number that are approved, there'd be 30% more on there that were denied. So that's an explanation. I don't find the board to be over liberal, in my experience, and particularly if there's objectors.
I have a question. Is there a reason why they're all voted on together and not individually for some of these?
Yes. That's my policy and practice, and it's consistent with Cox's recommendation, and also I think the majority of the practitioners, at least the ones who I think are good at it. So you'll hear attorneys say all the time, and there's a particular case that cites this, that says you're supposed to consider the application as a whole, right? So they'll come in and they'll say, let me think of an example. Give us this side yard variance because right now the lot exceeds coverage, but we're going to change the driveway into pavers and reduce the lot coverage. So you should give us the side yard variance because we are improving the drainage of the entire lot. All right, so then they say balance that and weigh it. So yeah, you're voting on a lot coverage variance and a side yard variance, but they've tied them together. They're saying one of the benefits you're getting is even though we'll still exceed the lot coverage, we're making it better. We're going from 63% to 44%. So they want you to consider the application as a whole. and you're directed by the law to consider the application as a whole. So my policy is, if you want us to consider the application as a whole, you have to rise and fall as a whole. So we vote on it as a whole. Now, there's exceptions to that. I can think of an example, which was Icona. I don't know if it was this board or the zoning board, but in that one, they wanted back-out parking and they wanted a pool for the hotel, the Icona Hotel.
That was this board.
That was this board. And on occasion, I'll hear where there's like rumblings where I can tell one thing the board doesn't like, another thing they don't mind. You can hear it happen at the hearing. So we may break them up on occasion. And on that one, the board liked the pool, but they didn't want the back-out parking. So we voted on it separately. We voted on the pool with the other aspects that they were doing, a bunch of improvements and stuff. And then we did the back-out parking separately, and it lost. And then we did the pool. We did the back-out parking, no. And then we did the pool, and they got that along with some other
They
stuff.
were also removing meters with that.
There was a
backup
bunch of other stuff, that's right,
Right.
yeah. There was a bunch of other stuff, but, so on occasion, we will vote separately. Now, on the zoning board, it happens more than it happens here, I don't know if it's ever happened here, but there's different voting requirements for certain variances. So for use variances, it requires 5 out of 7 as opposed to a mere majority. So on those, I'll give instructions, and I'll say, listen, I know you want this use variance, and one of the reasons you're giving that for the use variance is that you're removing a bunch of existing side yard things, blah, 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 blah. I say, so you have to understand, and I want you to object now. If you object, I'm going to vote on your whole application so you get the benefit of all the project, all the things you say, all the architectural work and all of that, you say is an architectural benefit. You're justifying your variance with the architecture. So we're going to vote on your whole project. But the whole project has to get 5 out of 7 or you lose. Do you understand that? And they say yes, and then we vote, and they have to get all 5 out of 7. Because if you listen carefully, you'll hear them all the time. They'll want a side yard variance, right? And there's no great reason to give the side yard variance. There's no great, if you just look at the side yard variance, why should they be 4 feet instead of 5? But then they say, but we're redoing this whole building and it's going to look beautiful, right? And we're also doing X, Y, Z. So I vote the whole package. That's the project you're presenting, up or down, and that's why you see them all voted together. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, that's the answer.
Can I just add one more comment? There were 11 variances granted for parking. That seemed to me like, and none were denied for parking. That seemed to me like a high number.
I can tell you, without analyzing each one, I can tell you something about that. It is extraordinarily rare. First of all, none of them, I'm quite certain none of them are new construction. A lot of times you'll have someone come in and they will be improving the parking situation, but still need a variance. So they may have 1 parking space, and they come in and they say, we're going to add a parking space. Now, under the RSIS, we would require 4 parking spaces. But we're going to take this 1 and make it 2. I think there was one over by the True Value there. And so technically, they need a parking variance, but they're improving the parking situation because they had 1 or none before. So it is very uncommon to grant it would be extremely shocking to grant a variance on new construction for residents with a variance. But it would be more common to grant a variance for an existing structure that is improving their parking situation but still need a variance. That is probably what almost all of them are. Some of them may be, they have all the parking they can get. So they're making a nice improvement, they're redoing a house, but there's just no physical space for 3 parking spaces. There's only 2, and they're going to need a parking variance. Some of them, they also have stacked parking, so they'll have a long driveway where they can park 4 cars, but they can't get you can't give them 4 spaces for stacked parking. So although they need a variance, they're actually putting a whole bunch of parking in. So that's a little deceiving. They're pretty tight about parking. So
One of the parking variances, sorry, one of the parking variances wasn't permitting parking in the setback. It seemed to me like that was a strange thing to do.
It could be in the side yard setback,
Yeah,
or if it's in a front yard setback, it might be in a commercial property, or anything that's not a 1 or 2 family dwelling, because then you're getting into where it's not allowed in the front yard. For 1 or 2 family dwellings, you can have parking in the front yard.
right.
And I think what Rich is saying is, they're trying to balance the fact that Cape May has a parking problem, and even though they're granting variances, it's because they're granting it to allow them to put it somewhere where maybe it wouldn't fit, but it makes sense to do it in the overall.
To get it
space.
off the street.
Correct.
Yeah, what was the property address on the one you're
That
talking?
was on Beach Drive, the one that's gotten dismantled at this point.
Oh,
That's
oh, that's a whole,
totally-
that's too long to describe. And actually, I'm surprised there's parking in the, oh, I know what that is. That's in the back. I think that parking, if there's parking in the setback there, that's the one that has the units in the back. I mean, it's a, 200-year-old building.
Yeah.
And I think they have the parking in the back of the building, and it may be touching the one side yard setback or something.
Yeah,
That's the
parking in-
least of the concerns of that.
933 Beach,
Yep,
parking in the, parking in the setback.
Yeah, that's an existing parking area that's in, behind the building. Yeah. That's, I think, surrounded on 2 or 3 sides by structures.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. All right, we'll move on to the final item that's on here, which is fire pits. And I'm going to let Lou, this sort of came up last minute, so this is not, what we're going to do tonight is just sort of throw this out there, maybe have a couple of thoughts on it. We're not going to go in-depth tonight, it's just, we're just surface touching it, and then but let Lou at least explain where it came from and what's,
I was having a conversation with our zoning officer regarding several things, and fire pits came up, and he explained that there's no guidance for him within the zoning code relating to fire pits. They're becoming a more and more desired amenity to not just commercial properties, but residential properties as well. And we're talking about mostly the gas ones, either propane or natural gas. And he's been treating them as secondary structures, and I called the chairman and asked, is this something that we want to give direction to the zoning officer on, if this is how they should be treated, what they should be done, do we want applications coming in with just the addition of a fire pit?
So can I comment on this? Because I've talked to you before about this. Because people had approached me about the Peter Shields, how the zoning board did not approve a fire pit, and then a fire pit appeared.
Right.
So I had talked to the DCA, Fire Prevention.
Okay.
Board, and according to his guidance, when there's a gas line put in, that it has to be inspected, and that depending on where it is, like a flood zone, there's certain, I guess, concern for safety, that if it's in a flood area, that the line could come, let's say,
Yeah, there's
on the ground or, during.
there's guidelines that come along with getting a UCC permit. What I was looking at was, looking for direction for the zoning officer, was more to do with the land use itself. Prior to getting a UCC permit, the zoning officer reviews everything to make sure that it meets within our zoning guidelines. So before you can even get the permit, he looks at it first. All of that takes place once the zoning officer says it's okay, you can build it.
Well, I thought there was something in our code, 'cause I was trying to look at it before the meeting.
Okay?
And I thought it was in, I think I wrote down here, oh, thank you. I wasn't sure what you were talking about, gas or fire pits. I wasn't going to be wood or gas. I wasn't sure where you were going with that when I saw that on the agenda. I thought it was it 199-2 had talks about the fee, because it talks about the gas lines, I guess, and that's where it comes in for fees. Is that what you're looking to do, about fees or
No.
permits?
no,
The permit for the fee, right?
No,
It's not a zoning code.
no, it's zoning code 525.
525 is the zoning code, and that's not part of the zoning code. And my comment to Lou was, a lot of this is fire-related. What's that, Mark Barham, he's, and Ricky, you would be more up on this and from your life in the fire company.
Yeah.
I-
It would be more of something that he would look at. And I don't know that anybody goes to Lowe's and buys a portable fire pit and puts it in the backyard, has to come in and file for a permit to put it in the backyard. I think that's getting a little bit
I think just with the
extreme,
gas line being
extreme.
put in.
The gas line is different.
Yeah.
That's a different thing, yes. But Rick, maybe you,
It's always been a matter of, well, the commercial ones, we've never really had a problem with because they're gas and they're out of the stat, they've already been approved, they're supposed to be approved. We've always kind of run into problems with residential ones, but it's such a matter of interpretation that like I said, we have much experience with the commercial ones, from the fire department standpoint, of having people complain about them.
Yeah, they'll come in with a manufacturer's guide as to how many feet they have to be from a structure. And fire prevention will review the commercial ones, and then the UCC permit takes over that. But before it even gets to the point where it's receiving a permit, zoning officer's reviewing them and is currently treating them like a secondary structure. So just something that we wanted to bring up, try and find some guidance.
If it's a hard pipe,
Right.
if it's a hard pipe, but not if it's propane or wood. Those are not structures.
Well, burning, I think, is prohibited in the
No, well,
city.
that's not true. Burning of grass and
Like open
leaves
burn.
and that sort of.
Like
And it
open
said
burn.
anything else. It said anything else is what
Well-
it says in the code.
It says open burning.
Yeah, open burn.
It doesn't say wood.
It says anything.
It says the other thing, okay, well, it could be trash for that matter.
The interpretation of open burning was always, you can't burn trash in your yard, or you rake your leaves and burn those, but having a fire in a contained pit within the, keeping it within the fire pit has always been allowed.
Well, it's my understanding that some people have been shut down because they've had an open flame burning with wood.
Well, they could have been really close to a structure. Some people, believe it or not, put them on the porch. Like, that kind of stuff would be shut down immediately. But if it's safe, if it's deemed safe, they let them go. I mean,
Yeah, there hasn't been that many complaints about it. It's just that
No, they're starting to come, the applications are starting to come in more and more. So it's just something that we felt, if we get an answer from right now, we could move forward in a steady and more organized basis.
well, I think that the part of the, again, tonight, we were just sort of raising
Right,
the issue.
right.
And let Craig have some time to look into it, and maybe we'll delve more deeply into it next time around, but just something to have out there. It's not a problem right now.
No.
The one problem with the Peter Shields is because it was a neighbor who didn't like the fact there was a fire pit out there.
Well, I
And
think
don't
it
know how-
also, they didn't get the approval. When they went for the approval, it was supposed to be just a patio. and then-
And
Listen, you guys are kind of really mixing apples and oranges. The Peter Shields thing was a site plan application.
Correct.
So the question is whether the fire pit is a structure that needs to be on the site plan. That's a totally different thing than whether you can have a fire pit in your backyard.
Correct.
Remember, zoning regulates structures and the uses within structures. That's what you do. So people playing badminton in the backyard is not a use. Okay?
It's not a structure.
And there's no structure. All right? So what you need to decide is if a fire pit's a structure, and if it is, then can that fire pit be used as a fire pit? So, it's an accessory use inside an accessory structure, like a pool, okay? So, I know in Westgate, we just discussed this, and question is, do you want to regulate the fire pit as a structure and a use? And then do you want to make it have conditions on it? So you can say they're permitted in residences, but here's the conditions on it. And then you lay them out. So that's what you guys got to think about, talk about, and resolve.
But this is a fire pit that's a permanently installed and hard, excuse me, and hard
There's two
pipe.
different animals. There's two different animals. There's the portable ones that aren't permanently installed.
Right.
I mean, that's almost the same as having a gas grill in your backyard,
Yeah.
it's.
The thing
A
is,
structure-
some got gas grills are
A structure has a
hard.
definition. You have an ordinance.
Yeah.
We write this stuff down. It says, "A combination of materials to form a construction for occupancy, use, or ornamentation, whether installed on, above, or below the surface of a parcel of land." I'll tell you, my opinion, when I was asked this at West Cape May, was that when you start stacking a bunch of bricks to form something that holds and contains a fire, that sounds like a structure to me. Whether you mortar the bricks together or not, it's not intended to be wheeled around the yard. It's a stack of bricks to form to be used. So I think that is a structure, and if someone put that 6 inches from the property line next to my window, I would be calling the zoning officer saying, why did someone install a fire pit next to my yard? Now, when someone says, well, you put a barbecue, you let people wheel their barbecue right there, I said, well, first, I prefer they didn't. But I understand that distinction, and, it's like when someone asks me the difference between alcohol and marijuana, I say, I can't explain why it's different, it just seems different to me. But, I mean, I get it. I'm just saying that Fire pit sounds like a structure once you start stacking a bunch of bricks 4 feet high. Sounds like a structure.
Dennis?
Yeah. Is this difference between the building of the fire pit and the laying of the gas line underground?
You're getting the permanency, and that, I don't, I guess some people that matters a lot to them, if there's something sticking out of the ground or not, but I don't know that it's any harder to move 6 tons of bricks that form a circle versus
No, I'm actually,
1-inch pipe in the ground. I don't know.
what I wanted to know is, do we have a current ordinance that governs the laying of pipe underground, a gas line?
That's a plumbing
That's not a
code,
zoning issue.
plumbing subcode. That's plumbing, that's not zoning.
Zoning regulates structures. So that's the issue you have to wrestle with, is that a structure?
But do we have a plumbing
The
ordinance?
reason the gas line gets some play is that has to do with whether it's installed on, above, or below the surface of the ground. So a gas line is clearly installed below the surface, that's easy, okay? Is a pile of bricks in a circle installed above a parcel of land? It sounds like a combination of materials installed above a parcel of land to me. That's what it sounds like, to be used. All right, so, you know, you have your definition, but I think if you're gonna do it, the way to do it is just come up with some reasonable regulation of it. That's what I told Westgate May. You guys think about it, and then put it in there and say it's permitted. All right, but it has to be in a certain place, in a certain way, and then you've done your job, you know, because you have to give some guidance to your zoning officer. He's kind of told you, I need some help here.
But when you buy them, they come with manufacturer's recommendations how you use it, right? I'm sure it states how far it should be from houses, and if you go to Lowe's and buy a metal wood one or a propane one, I'm sure it's gonna say in there, it's not recommended to be used within this close to the house, and
And I don't think we want to require people to come in and file for a building permit to go out to Lowe's and buy a fire pit.
no, but you might be able to,
That's a little extreme.
you might be able to
he's
read
looking
those
for the-
recommendations
Yes.
to set guidelines on what's allowed.
Yeah, these some, yeah, sure, I mean, it's.
Yeah, they would serve a good template.
Because that's what the manufacturer's suggesting how to use it.
Right.
All right.
We'll
We'll talk, I'll let Bruce know that we're discussing it and that we will provide him some guidance in the near
see
future.
what his thoughts are, how he
Right.
might want to approach it.
When people build a landscaping retaining wall, like they stack, 3 foot high of decorative pavers, 3 foot high, is like a 20-foot long retaining wall. Is that a structure? Do they usually deal with that?
I don't think so.
It's landscaping.
Yeah.
And listen, I put around my garden, I stacked slate all around my garden. That's part of landscaping.
If Craig was here, I know you can't have a retaining wall within a certain distance of the front yard. There's something about that in there. We had that at one of the, there was a variance for having a retaining wall a certain distance from the front yard. I forget what it was, but I know we had that somewhere. There's some regulation about that, but, well, those are things for you guys to get paid to think about. You decide and come up with
All right,
policies.
well,
That's-
we'll talk to Bruce,
there you go.
okay? Anything else for the good of the board? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay,
We don't
thanks,
have to
guys.
vote on that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we're going to vote. When are we going to vote? Thank you.
Okay, guys.